Chapter 40. The bolt of jet-black plasm hit the nearest display table. The shaman's headdress, the pots and pipes, the table itself, and a section of the floor all vanished with a noise like something being sucked sharply down a plug hole. Foul steam rose from the wound in the floor. A meter or so away, Nathaniel rolled head over heels and got straight to his feet. His head felt woozy from the roll, but he did not hesitate. He ran for the next display table, the one with the metal cubes. As the old magician raised his hand once more, he scooped up as many cubes as he could and disappeared behind a neighboring bookcase. The second plasm bolt struck just behind him. He paused for a moment. Beyond the bookshelves, the old magician made a clucking noise with his tongue.
"What are you doing? Do you plan to toss more mites at me?"
Nathaniel glanced at the objects in his hand. Not mites, but scarcely any better. Prague cubes, minor conjurer's tricks peddled by low-caste magicians. Each cube was little more than a mite bottled up inside a metal shell with a variety of mineral powders. When released with a simple command, mite and powders combusted in an amusing way. Silly diversions, nothing more. Certainly not a weapon. Each cube had a paper wrap stamped with the famous distilling glass logo of the alchemists of Golden Lane. They were old, probably 19th century. Perhaps they would not work at all. Nathaniel picked one and tossed it, wrapping and all, over the top of the shelves. He shouted the release command. With a brilliant shower of silver sparkles and a tinny melody, the imp inside the cube combusted. A faint but unmistakable fragrance of lavender filled the gallery. He heard the old magician burst into a hearty chuckle.
"How charming! Please, some more. I wish to smell my best when we take over the country. Do you have rowan flavor? That would be my favorite."
Nathaniel selected another cube. Party gimmicks or not, they were the only things he had. He could hear the squeaking of the old man's shoes as he shuffled down the gallery towards the end of his aisle. What could he do? On either side, bookcases blocked his way out. Or did they? Each shelf was open-backed. On every row, he could see above the tops of the books into the next aisle. If he pushed himself through... He tossed the next cube and ran at the shelf. Maurice Schuyler rounded the corner, his hand invisible inside its wavering bulb of force. Nathaniel hit the second shelf of books like a high jumper clearing a bar. He muttered the release command. The cube exploded in the old man's face. A starburst of purple sparks zipped and spun, high as the ceiling. A 19th century Czech marching song rang out briefly in accompaniment. In the next aisle along, 50 books crashed down like a falling wall. Nathaniel sprawled on top of them. He felt, rather than saw, the third bolt of plasm destroy the aisle behind him. The magician's voice now carried a slight note of irritation.
"Little boy, time is short. Stand still, please."
But Nathaniel was already on his feet and hurtling towards the next shelf. He was moving too fast to think, never allowing himself a moment's pause, lest his terror rose up to overwhelm him. His one aim was to reach the door at the far end of the gallery. The old man had said there was a pentacle there.
"John, listen."
He landed on his back in the next aisle, amid a shower of books.
"I admire your resolve."
A leather-bound dictionary fell against the side of his head, making bright lights twinkle across his vision. He struggled upright.
"But it is foolish to seek revenge on your master's behalf."
Another burst of magical force, another section of shelving vanished. The room was filled with thick, acrid smoke.
"Foolish and unnatural. I myself killed my own master long ago. Now, if your Underwood had been a worthy man, I would understand it."
Nathaniel threw the third cube behind him. It bounced harmlessly against a table and did not go off. He had forgotten to say the command.
But he was not a worthy man, Was he, John? He was a driveling idiot. Now, you will lose your life for him. You should have stayed away.
Nathaniel had reached the final aisle. He was not far from the door at the end of the room. It was a few strides off. But here, for the first time, he stopped dead. A great anger swelled inside him and damped down his fear. Shoes squeaked softly. The old man shuffled back up the gallery, following the trail of scattered books, checking each side aisle as he went. He saw no sign of the boy. Drawing near the door, he turned into the final aisle, hand raised at the ready, and clicked his tongue in exasperation. The aisle was empty. Nathaniel, who had silently clambered back through the shelves to the previous aisle and had now crept up behind him, thus had the element of surprise. 3 cubes hit the magician at once and exploded together at a single command. They were a lime green Catherine wheel, a ricocheting Viennese cannon, and an ultramarine bonfire. And although the effect of each one individually would have been modest, taken together, they became quite potent. A medley of cheap popular ballads sounded, and the air instantly became heavy with the flavors of Rowan, Edelweiss, and camphor. The combined explosion blew the old man off his feet and straight into the door at the end of the gallery. He hit it hard, head first. The door caved in. He slumped across it, his neck twisted oddly. The black energy pulsing on his hand instantly snuffed out. Nathaniel walked slowly towards him through the smoke, cupping a final cube loosely in his palm. The magician did not move. Perhaps he was faking it. In a moment he would spring up, ready to fight. This was possible. He had to be ready for him. Closer. Still no movement. Now he was adjacent to the old man's splayed leather shoes. Another half step. Surely he would get up now. Maurice Schuyler did not get up. His neck was broken. His face sagged against a panel of the door, his lips slightly apart. Nathaniel was close enough to count all the lines and creases on his cheek. He could see little red veins running across the nose and under the eye. The eye was open, but glazed, unseeing. It looked like that of a fish on a slab. A trace of limp white hair fell across it. Nathaniel's shoulders began to shake. For a moment, he thought he was going to cry. Instead, he forced himself to remain motionless, waiting for his breathing to slow, for the shaking to die down. When his emotion was safely contained, he stepped over the body of the old man. "You made a mistake," he said softly. "It is not my master that I'm doing this for." The room beyond was small and windowless. It had perhaps once been a storeroom. A pentacle had been drawn in the center of the floor, with candles and incense pots carefully arranged around. 2 of the candles had been knocked over by the impact of the falling door, and these Nathaniel carefully set upright in position. On one of the walls was a gold picture frame, hanging from a nail by a string. There was neither painting nor canvas inside the frame. Instead, it was filled with a beautiful image of a large circular sunny room in which many small figures moved. Nathaniel knew instantly what the frame was, a scrying glass, far sharper and more powerful than his lost bronze disc. He stepped closer to inspect it. It showed a vast auditorium filled with chairs, whose carpeted floor shone strangely. The ministers were entering it from one side, laughing and chatting, still holding their glasses, accepting smart black pens and folders from a line of servants by the door. The Prime Minister was there, at the center of a milling throng, the grim Efreet still attentively in tow. Lovelace had not yet arrived. But any moment now, he would enter the hall and set his plan in motion. Nathaniel noted a box of matches lying on the floor. Hurriedly, he lit the candles, double-checked the incense, and stepped into the pentacle. admiring, despite his haste, the elegance with which it had been drawn. Then he closed his eyes, composed himself, and searched his memory for the incantation. After a few seconds, he had it ready. His throat was a little claggy because of the smoke. He coughed twice and spoke the words. The effect was instantaneous. It had been so long since Nathaniel had completed a summoning that he gave a little start when the genie appeared. It was in its gargoyle form and wore a peeved expression. "You really have got perfect timing, haven't you?" it said. "I just gotten the assassin where I wanted him, and all of a sudden you remember how to call me." "It's about to start." The effort of calling Bartimaeus had made Nathaniel lightheaded. He leaned against a wall to steady himself. "Look, there in the glass. They're gathering. Lovelace is on his way now, and he'll be wearing the amulet, so he won't feel the effects of whatever happens. I think it's a summoning." "You don't say. I'd worked that one out already. Well, come on then. Surrender to my tender claws." They flexed them experimentally. They let off a creaking sound. Nathaniel went white. The gargoyle rolled its eyes. "I'm going to have to carry you," it said. "We'll have to hurry if we want to stop him entering the room. Once he's in, the place will be sealed. You can bet on that." Gingerly, Nathaniel stepped forward. The gargoyle tapped a foot impatiently. "Don't worry on my account," it snapped. "I won't strain my back or anything. I'm feeling angry, and my strength's returned." With this, it made a grab, snatched Nathaniel around the waist, and turned to leave, only to trip over the body lying in the doorway. "Watch where you leave your victims! I stubbed my toe on that." With a bound, it had cleared the debris and was leaping through the gallery, spurring itself on with great beats of its stony wings. Nathaniel's stomach lurched horribly with every stride. "Slow down," he gasped. "You'll make me sick." "You won't like this, then." Bartimaeus leaped through the arch at the end of the gallery, ignored the landing and staircase completely, and plummeted directly to the hall 10 meters below. Nathaniel's wail made the rafters echo. Half flying, half leaping, the gargoyle negotiated the next corridor. "So," it said agreeably, "you've made your first direct kill. How does it feel? Much more manly, I'm sure. Does it help blot out the death of Underwood's wife?" Nathaniel was too nauseous to listen, let alone answer. A minute later, the ride came to an end so abruptly that Nathaniel's limbs swung about like a rag doll's. The gargoyle had halted at the corner of a long corridor. It dropped him to the floor and pointed silently up ahead. Nathaniel shook his head to stop his vision spinning, and stared. At the other end of the corridor was the open door to the auditorium. 3 people stood there. A haughty servant, who held the door ajar, the fish-faced magician Rufus Lime, and Simon Lovelace, who was buttoning up his collar. A brief flash of gold showed at his throat. Then the collar was adjusted and his tie wrapped in place. Lovelace clapped his companion on the shoulder and strode through the door. "We're too late," Nathaniel hissed. "Can't you—" He looked down to his side in surprise. The gargoyle was gone. A tiny voice whispered in his ear.
"Smooth your hair down and get to the door. We can enter as a servant. Hurry it up."
Nathaniel ignored the strong desire to scratch his earlobe. He could feel something small and ticklish hanging there. He squared his shoulders, swept back his hair, and trotted along the corridor. Lime had departed elsewhere. The servant was swinging the door, too. "Wait!" Nathaniel wished his voice was deeper and more commanding. He approached the servant at speed. "Let me in, too. They want someone extra to serve the drinks." "I don't recognize you," the man said, frowning. "Where's young William?" He had a headache. I was called in at the last minute." Footsteps along the corridor. A voice of command. "Wait!" Nathaniel turned. He heard Bartimaeus swearing on the cusp of his earlobe. The black-bearded mercenary was approaching, fast, barefooted, ragged cape swinging, blue eyes afire.
Quick!
The genie's voice was urgent.
The door's open a crack. Slip inside.
The mercenary quickened his pace. Stop that boy! But Nathaniel was already jamming a boot heel down hard on the servant's shoe. The man whooped with agony, and his clutching hand jerked back. With a wriggle and a squirm, Nathaniel evaded his grasp and, pushing at the door, squeezed himself through. The insect on his ear leaped up and down in agitation.
Shut it on them!
He pushed with all his strength, but the servant was now applying his full weight on the other side. The door began to swing open. Then, the voice of the mercenary, calm and silky, sounded beyond the door. "Don't bother," it said. "Let him go in. He deserves his fate." The force on the door eased, and Nathaniel was able to push it shut. Locks clicked into position within the wood. Bolts were drawn. The small voice spoke against his ear.
Now, that was ominous.
It said.